All right, welcome to the Smylie Show, Chad Mumm. Chad, I tell you what, man, I just finished watching pretty much all of Full Swing Season 2. Luckily, I was given the screener access, so I've gotten to see it all, and we're going to get into the entire conversation of Full Swing Season 2, the man that helped produce it all, and Season 1 as well. But Chad, I want to get to know you just a little bit better and how you got into this position, this profession. You know, where did this journey all start for you?
Yeah, man. Well, first off, huge fan of yours, huge fan of this podcast. I'm honored to be on it. You've had some amazing guests and some great
Yes,
conversations here. So,
I'll try to live up
to the high bar.
Come on.
It's been
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been playing golf. Golf's been my thing my whole life. I've been, really fortunate to start as a young kid. I learned when I was 6 years old, my dad was in the Air Force, and, the joke about Air Force bases is they put the runway in first, then the golf course, then they build everything else. So I kind of, had access to golf at a young age. And then, my first ever job was like a stock boy at a golf store in Georgia. I worked as a cart boy. When I was in college, I went to UGA. I worked at the golf course there and watched the guys like Brian Harmon and Bubba and all that whole crew just bombing it off the range. I worked on the other side of the range. So, golf's always been my thing. I've been really lucky to have a pretty good career as a producer and make a lot of different kinds of television shows. I've been working in media my whole career, and Full Swing was a sort of 8-9 year process to kind of get the trust of not just the PGA Tour, but also the governing bodies of the sport who run the majors and the players and their agents and their spouses, and to put it all together into this thing was sort of this multi-year, really multi-year process of just kind of never quitting. And, I was running a film and TV business out here in Los Angeles, and we do development meetings all the time, and we go through all the various projects. And I kind of had a rule where if you don't have an update on your project in, over a 6-month period, it comes off the slate. But since I was the boss, every time we get to the golf show, I'd be staying on, and I can't tell you how many times I sat in our meetings and it came up and I'd say no update, and broke every rule I had in the book for our team about leaving it on the slate. And one day in 2019, after, playing golf with some execs at the PGA Tour, Chris Wandell, most notably, I got to tell him, hey, we have an update. And from that moment, the show was born, and we're just so thrilled to share with the world Season 2, which I am so excited to talk to you about.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you left the golf course that day with the expectation of, hey, we are going to get full access to the PGA Tour, I imagine you had to be a little bit kind of nervous about just that opportunity, but also excited knowing just about how, the PGA Tours followed on the television, the broadcasts, and the stories, but you don't really get the in-depth and just day-to-day stuff that you see behind the curtains with these guys.
Yeah. Look, after grinding it out for so long to kind of finally get the opportunity to get it made, it was just I was just so pumped. And that's probably the most consequential round of golf I've ever played in my entire life. It's kind of awesome that this show got its start on a golf course. I think it's very fitting. But I think when I first sat down, so our, Vox Media Studios produces this show. It's co-produced with Box to Box Films. They make Drive to Survive and Breakpoint, a bunch of other shows. And when I first met with them, they're not golfers. They're, it was Paul Martin and James K. Reese and Warren Smith. They're all from London and England. And we sat down at dinner in LA, and I said, look, I think there's a real opportunity in golf. And, not being golf fans, they also saw that because they had all these sort of preconceived notions about what professional golf would be like and what those athletes would be like. And James K. Reese, one of the founders of Box to Box, said, look, what I love about this is anytime you get behind the curtain of anything, it's never what you expect. And I love the fact that non-hardcore golf fans are going to come with some expectations about what they think this is going to be. And that just means in the first 5 seconds, we can kind of completely subvert them. And, Season 1, I thought we did an amazing job of bringing the world to life and really pulling back the curtain on some of these stories and not just like the players, but their caddies and their spouses and their friends, and like kind of the camaraderie that exists out there in professional golf in a really consequential year where there was a schism and all of a sudden they're looking around the locker room, someone going to live, is, what's going to happen. But going into season 2, like we already established the world, we don't have to explain what a cut is. We don't have to explain that, a tournament's 4 days and, and if you miss the cut, you don't get paid, and we don't have to tell you what a par is. We can just kind of throw you right back into the action. And, season 2 kind of picks up right where season 1 ends. And I think it's just it gets going and builds momentum and takes you all the way to the end. So.
Yeah, and season 1, you just kind of mentioned just having to educate a potential non-golf audience that you're trying to introduce the PGA Tour to. Was there thoughts during that season 1 and how you produced it, thinking, do we have to explain all this, or did you really feel like did we need to educate this Netflix audience on just things that come natural to us in the golf world?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am the biggest hardcore golf fan that exists in the world, probably. And so that, that's torture sometimes, like trying to, but we also, you having made, I've made a bunch of other shows for Netflix, and I think like it's hard to fathom just how big Netflix is. And when the numbers, 1 million people, 50 million people, 180 million people, like it gets so mind-boggling when you think of the scale of how many people watch Netflix shows. And you just realize, like, not only is it not just hardcore golf fans, it's not even people in the US, it's people all over the world. I mean, the show's translated into like 50 plus languages and gets put in 190 countries. I mean, it is like everywhere. And you have to tell stories. You have to give people a grounding where they have a reason to root for somebody. And so you kind of have to explain the rules, and the basics of it. And then you can pull people into kind of human stories. And from there, it's like you can make it relatable, and you can you can humanize these athletes who do incredible stuff out on the golf course, but, you feel the stakes for them. And so for us, it was really important knowing that the vast majority of the audience aren't going to be hardcore golf fans. We had to explain kind of the basics, but, now we don't have to do that anymore. We can just throw you right into the action.
I love it. But I understand that being how big Netflix is. And, I think one of the really neat things that came out of just the first season of Full Swing is, for the most part, the PGA Tour, to become a star, you had to play well. And it didn't come from just being a really nice guy and a cool person. And I think in season 1, having someone like Joel Dahmen, he's a guy that I think everybody on the PGA Tour knew he was one of the coolest dudes out there, but like really the world and the golf audience, I would say probably had no clue just what type of guy Joel Dahmen was. I think for you, like being able to not just change the life of a guy like Joel Dahmen, but I think that's the cool part of the business of golf now, that you have Netflix as an avenue to just strengthen your brand.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, Joel was definitely on my radar, like as a hardcore fan, but is sort of the perfect kind of success story for a show like this, where, a personality and someone who's just really open. And I think that, how do you get a successful, episode out of being on the Netflix show? It's like, you just got to lean in. And I think Joel, more than pretty much anybody else from season 1, like got that and actually leaned in. And, it was like the kind of thing where whenever we'd ask, he'd say yes. Like, hey, can we come over to your house? You just missed the cut. Can we come over? Sure. Like, can we have the cameras with you in this moment? Absolutely. Like, he just decided that he was going to say yes, and he was going to really lean in. And like,
I'm sure Gino too.
Gino too. Yeah. And Lana, like the whole crew, like it just, they really all leaned in and they bought in, and they kind of, what we say to everybody is like, the more you kind of like lean into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And I think Joel's like the perfect example of that. Another player that really I want to give credit to is Matt Fitzpatrick, like who has not done a ton of media stuff before, but he made the commitment on his own and said, look, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to never say no. And, he's like in season 1, he is in the final pairing at the PGA Championship. We ride in with him in the car. Really frustrating day.
Really cool.
He lets us back in the car again. Same thing in season 2. You see him ironically at the same tournament, PGA Championship this year at Oak Hill, or last year at Oak Hill, misses the cut again, frustrated. Guess what? He let us in the car. And I got to give tons of credit to Matt and those guys and really everybody who participated. But those two really leaned in a lot.
Yeah, and as you approach season 2, I imagine season 1, when you're trying to figure out like who are going to be the guys from the tour that are going to be featured in all these episodes. When season 2 is coming around and you're approaching players, you're approaching agents, was there more of a likelihood that you were going to be able to get guys to do it, or were there guys leaning out from their experience, or were there more guys that are showing up like, please pick me, I want to be featured?
I think it was a bit of both, honestly. Like these shows never really get easier to make because you still have to show up with the cameras in an intense moment and film and hope that they don't kick you out of the room. So on some sense, yes, like guys like Wyndham Clark, had their agents, their agents have been reaching out really honestly, like for the whole history of the show saying, hey, Wyndham's going to be the guy. And, it was a great example of a player who's, raised their hand and it ended up, in season 2 in a very big way. And obviously US Open champion Wyndham Clark. And, that may be my favorite episode of the series, him and Joel's episode. So, and some players really like got it and leaned in. I think Rory, another example of a player who really understood kind of what this was and leaned back in and then others, yeah, they're like, I had enough. And so we had a little mix of both. And I think like, it's just kind of how it goes. And you try to make the best show possible and tell the kind of most compelling, interesting stories with the access that you have. And we've been really lucky with this show that overall we've had amazing access. And I think we get deeper into this sport than a lot of these other kind of similar shows do, just given the fact that, golfers, and I think in general, they're good talkers. It's not like they're on a team where they've got their comms department and they get kind of every once in a while to do a press conference. I mean, you played the professional golf for a long time. It's like, come off the course, like there's a mic in your face. These athletes are used to talking about their game. They're personable. They've been playing golf with other random people their whole life. Like they're just, I think, pretty like good at talking, which makes it, easier for us to kind of tell their stories in a real authentic way. And, and again, it takes a lot of buy-in from them, but we've got it. And I think we've got, deeper hooks into this world than a lot of these other shows do. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of players are very brand conscious, just not wanting to say something that's going to get them in trouble with who their sponsors and who their partners are. And also, there's just the general respect of the game of golf. It's a game where you respect yourself, you respect your opponents, and you respect the game. And it's just, to me, I imagine that would be one of the hurdles that you may have dealt with. It's like, wait, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Can we go back and delete that? Was there any of that's happened along the way? It's like, I regret saying that. Please delete it.
Honestly, that's never happened really once. Like a player's like regretted saying something.
Yeah.
I think the benefit of this show is that it doesn't come out like the same day. We have a different relationship with the players than I think the other people in the media do, because it's the media's job to kind of cover like professional golf and to write stories. And with us and our cameras, the guys know that this isn't going to come out for another like 6 months, 9 months. There's just like not that instant, like it's not going out on Twitter the next day. They're not worried about it distracting them the following week. Like we become part of the fabric of their lives. And our goal with the crew and our producers who are out in the field is really just to like blend into the background. Like we want these athletes to forget the cameras are there. And, and then it's nice. I think they just get used to the fact that, hey, I can be vulnerable in this moment, and I'm not going to see it on the internet like 2 days later, and they've got a whole year of context to come back from a really low point. And, that's the secret of this show is like, we want to be there for your kind of lowest point, just because it gives us a chance to bring you back to a moment when you do kind of come back. And it's like, if it's all just flat, like if you're just like playing great all year and everything's positive, like there's no arc to that. That's not an interesting story. So, to the credit of the players that say yes, like they get that. They're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to let us see their lowest points. And that just means that we can bring them all the way back when they have a moment of like triumph or, overcoming adversity. And, and this season in particular with the Ryder Cup, like it just gave us this great narrative device because, it's one of the few things in like our world making the show that we actually could predict. Like you show up at a major, we're following sort of 8 to 10 players. There's 100 something guys in the field. Like, hopefully one of our guys wins. Like, sometimes we've gotten lucky, other times we haven't. But with the Ryder Cup, it's like there's 24 players, there's 2 captains. One team's going to win, one team's going to lose. We knew there was going to be drama on both sides, win or lose, kind of no matter what. And then the captain's picks process, like, it's the one time we actually could get cameras in a place where we knew a dramatic moment was going to happen, and we could actually film it, like, because we knew it was coming. What didn't take someone having to win a major for us to get a big payoff. And so we love the buy-in from both sides of the Ryder Cup teams, and particularly the captains who kind of gave us an unprecedented look into that process. And I think it pays off. If you're watching this podcast and you haven't watched the show yet, stick through the whole thing, because the Ryder Cup payoff is it's electric.
He's right, guys. You're going to want to stick around for the end. The last 3 episodes are featured basically the entire process of the Ryder Cup, and it's split into a part 1 and a part 2 for the Ryder Cup. And it really is so fantastic to watch. I was like so nervous watching some of it, even though I knew the results, I knew who got picked on the team, but still, man, it's crazy. We're going to get into some of this Ryder Cup talk here at the end, Chad, and I just want to kind of go back to really just the beginning of Full Swing 2 and or season 2, I should say. If you had to describe this season, whether it be a word or just a sentence, just summing it all up for you, how would you describe season 2?
I think this season is a lot more narrative, in the sense that, there are two-part episodes. Like, season 1 was very, we had an episode here, we had an episode here, we had an episode here. It's not necessarily in chronological order. But season 2 it throws you right into the action and pulls you across an entire season long narrative. And I think that was always something that we wanted to be able to do, is to be able to establish kind of a base of characters, like our kind of cinematic universe, so to speak, of these players, and to be able to bring audiences back to them in different moments throughout the year. And you really start to feel you're just propelled along this journey on the ride that these players were on and their families were on. And I think to me, the word that best describes that is kind of narrative. I think you can look at the entirety of season 2 and it feels like one big consistent narrative arc. And you can see the character development really evolve over the course of the season. And, episode 1 really centers around Rory McIlroy and his struggles at the beginning of the year. And then ultimately his, the sort of betrayal that he felt on June 6th when the PIF, PGA Tour framework agreement was announced. And you get to see kind of his coming to terms with that over the course of an entire season, and then kind of culminating in him in the Ryder Cup, forgetting all the money and all the arguments and just playing for country and for his teammates. And and it's obviously, the show's not just about Rory, but I think that's a great example of a season long arc that we didn't have in season 1, and the Ryder Cup gave us that reason to build a universe and have it pay off or not pay off for these characters, and just be really high stakes for everybody.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, but in season 1, Rory just agreed to come on very late in the process.
Yeah.
Most of the filming was almost done, and y'all and you're like, all right, Rory, if your schedule permits, you got one last shot to get your say in all this.
Yeah, well, it was even crazier than that. We didn't have an ending to the show, and we showed up at the Tour Championship, and, this was a few weeks after the Delaware meeting, and, they did it was Tiger and Rory and all that whole crew that got together about how do we deal with the Live challenge. And so Rory was emerging as a loud voice in that kind of conversation. And we knew we wanted to get him, but he had not committed to season 1. And I think I've told the story before, but I flew to Atlanta a Sunday night before the Tour Championship and just went to Eastlake at 7:30 in the morning and just waited around until I saw Rory, and just kind of hoped and prayed that I would get a moment where he was going to be alone and I could just actually give him the pitch directly and just say dude. And that's what happened. I'm walking around the clubhouse. upstairs at East Lake is, it's where the locker room is. There's sort of a player dining area. And I'm just like wandering the halls back and forth, like essentially pacing. There's no one there. It's like Hideki Matsuyama had been on the range for like 3 hours already. That was it. I didn't see anybody else. And of course I walk past this little alcove and look in the window, look in, and there's Rory like sitting there eating some breakfast, like alone, completely alone in a room. And I'm like, okay,
you just like beamed in. You're like,
you can't get a better opportunity than this. And I'd like to think that I just like marched right up to him and said, "You're going to be in this show." It's gonna be But no, I like completely panicked and like went into the locker room, looked in the mirror, like psyched myself up and said, like,
do
kind
this.
of the ending of the show is hinging on this like 10-minute conversation. Like, you got to nail it. And to Rory's credit, I walked in, I sat down and said, "Listen, I think you need to be a part of this. If you don't do it, then no one's going to hear from you until 2024, where we are right now in season 2." Because his team had said he'd be interested in doing season 2. And, I thought this was going to be some long drawn out like conversation. And he immediately was like, I'm in. Send over the agreement. Like, I'm down. Let's go. And like 2 hours later, he was mic'd up in the locker room, and then obviously went on to win the championship and the FedEx Cup. And it was just, it was a dream.
It's perfect.
But all of that Roy stuff was kind of like, the show was mostly done, and, we're able to like kind of, I think, stick the landing. So.
Well, we talk about all the time on this show, just there's like a formula to winning professional golf tournaments. And there's some of it's like, being in the right place at the right time on the back nine, you got to have the opportunity. You need a little luck. And I think like just going back to the beginning of season 1 and just where the golf world was, couldn't have been in a crazier place. And then this year, the June 6th agreement comes out that they're merging. It's like, dude, you can't write up better scripts than what you guys have had, along with, I mean, some of the guys that y'all have featured in your shows have gone on to win big events and major championships and events. I mean, you could have picked guys that had all of them could have had terrible years. And you're like, okay, these are tough stories to tell, but y'all have had a little luck along the way.
I mean, that's such an understatement. The amount of we had. I mean, look, anything like this is just, you can do everything you can to like get really good access. You can get all the agreements signed. You can get commitments. You can get the cameras in the room, but you still got to have, you got to be lucky. You got to, timing is everything. It's like, people say about real estate, it's like location. With a show like this, where it's not scripted, like it's just timing. And, there was a moment in time since the deal with the tour got done in 2019. Like, we could have made this show and started filming in 2020, and we would have been stuck in the COVID year and like the bubble that just wouldn't have
been no juice.
No juice. And so like, because of COVID, it actually pushed us back. We couldn't start that season. So it pushed us back into, 22. And it just like the year that we had with the live defections last year, frankly, I thought coming into season 2, we were going to be able to put that story down for a minute. So much of season 1 was about guys leaving. Are they going to leave? Are they going? And the sort of controversy of what live meant and what was the future of the PGA Tour. And so I kind of thought, all right, well, this season we can take a break from that and like focus on the Ryder Cup. And no, sure enough, June 6th happens. I mean, I was out here in LA. It was like 7 a.m, and I got a phone call like from Netflix saying like, "Did you see the news? Like, live in the PGA Tour are merging." And I was like, "That's not true. Like,
it can't be true.
The website must have been hacked." And to have something like that happen this year, where it flips this narrative back onto the PGA Tour players. It wasn't so much about like the live guys anymore, and were they doing it for the money or for why is golf just a job for them, or is it about like legacy? We really explored that theme a lot in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2 kind of puts it right back on the guys that stayed, and all of a sudden there was this really kind of transformative, dramatic moment where they all started looking around, being like, "Wait a minute, like, what does this mean for us?" And there was a real sense of betrayal and a real sense of surprise and how secret it was, and you get to see the fallout of that in the show in a real way. And I do have a funny story about that moment. So, I was out here in LA filming, we actually were very fortunate that week, because it was US Open kind of that Monday. So that happened on a Tuesday. It was June 6th. So June 5th was like the final kind of regional or sectional qualifiers for the US Open.
Yeah.
And so we had a bunch of cameras out following those stories. So, and then we had knowing that it was a down week for some of our players. We actually had cameras like at home with players that day. And it was amazing that we were able to capture like real time reaction from everybody kind of in the moment, like knowing what was, not knowing that it was going to happen, but kind of seeing it in real time. And the funny story is we had a producer on our team, a younger producer who was essentially an associate producer who all year had been saying like, hey, I want to produce a shoot. Like I'm ready. Like give me a little crew, put me in, like I want a little Battlefield promotion. And we agreed for that week that we're like, okay, we're going to like give you a little opportunity to like prove yourself as a producer. So we sent him up to Canada to the RBC Canadian Open with a small crew. And we were like, okay, this is a total layup.
What could happen in Canada, right? Like what could happen in Canada?
This is a total layup, like low stakes shoot. You're going to follow Ludwig Oberg in his like qualifier for the US Open. And then you're going to go with him Tuesday to sign up like for his first event as a PGA Tour member. And so, we're like, whether we use it or not, I don't know, but it's a cool story. This guy's obviously a budding superstar. We've been sort of following him, and we actually thought, dark horse, maybe Ryder Cup candidate. So we thought, okay, let's just ride in with him, have him sign up to be on the PGA Tour, all the kind of logistics you have to do on your first day as a PGA Tour member, and then go out and follow him practicing a little bit. And it was just like totally low stakes. And of course, like I look at the phone and I'm like, holy crap, like PDV's in Canada with his crew, and he calls me and he's like, what do I do? And I'm like, just don't stop filming. Like just record it, just record everything. And so talk about being in the right place at the right time. That's the ultimate kind of Battlefield promotion. I mean, that kid went from, soldier to general, like really quick, and he killed it. He nailed it. It was awesome.
Man, I can't imagine that. That's like going from, being a senior in college and they throw you out in a major championship. That's like probably the producer change probably from what he just experienced there. And like the beginning of before you kind of told this story, you mentioned how you touched on some of the live stuff last year. And actually, I think you guys went to the opening event that they had. I think it was in England, if I recall. And I'll say this year, the one surprise I had from the season was that there wasn't as much featured of the live golf tournaments. I thought there would be a little bit more of the players on the live golf tour, a little bit more of maybe the trash talk that we've kind of seen on Twitter from a lot of the live golf players. Was there just, I guess I'm trying to come up with a question here, trying to figure out with the live golf and the PGA Tour, was it sensitive to like spend too much time over there at the live golf, or was that just a decision not to go to as many of their events?
I mean, I think for the reality is like this show is really built around obviously the PGA Tour, but also kind of the majors and the Ryder Cup. So our focus really was telling the story of like these players at the majors. And for me, it was really fascinating. Yeah, it was fascinating to be at the Masters, where we knew that was going to be a big moment when like all of these guys were back together for the first time. And it was really kind of like, it was striking on the Wednesday sort of par 3 contest to see like DJ and Brooks, walking out with like John and Rory and JT and Jordan, and everybody's just kind of like getting ready to tee off with their kids. And it was just like, oh, right, like this is normal again. This is like what it's supposed to feel like, And I think that, you see it in the show, but it kind of shocked the world when Rory said he was going to play practice round with Brooks. And obviously we know how that tournament unfolded. And then the PGA Championship, sort of Brooks getting his 5th major. And, I think we definitely wanted to make sure we included, those live guys and their storyline's a huge part of professional golf. And, you see some of like Brooks's lead in, obviously playing well going into the Masters and then, going on to win. And then DJ, gotta have DJ in this thing. And it was fun to kind of spend more time with Dustin. And
he's unreal, man.
I mean,
he's not a real
so
person.
Much swagger, dude. It's just like, what a cool person. Yeah, totally.
He's just, I wish I was DJ. I mean, just golly.
I mean, hard to,
what can that man not do?
Yeah, exactly. So,
I just, you kind of just mentioned Brooks and what his kind of career just storyline looked like winning his 5th major. And I think that was one of the things that surprised me, because the first episode is a Rory feature. And I was kind of taken back a little bit just about how much Rory pays attention just to kind of the other players in his generation, and Brooks being one of those players. I think that's one storyline that is going to be one that people don't really expect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, he's watching, he's paying attention, and you feel it. These guys aren't, they're not robots. Like, they want to win, and they want to win big, and they don't like to see people pass them by. And, I think you feel it in a really real way. And when we we ended season 1 with Rory, like, literally on top of the world.
Yeah.
He had won the FedEx Cup, sort of whatever is her kind of heroic ending for Rory. And then we start the season, he's number 1 in the world. And, and quickly kind of goes off the rails on the golf course for him at the majors. And, you can like really feel the frustration. And I think like all that stuff's like, is really authentic. I mean, again, these guys want to win. It's so frustrating when you only get sort of 4 majors a year. Like, you're like, you have limited kind of chances to get it done. And the frustration, obviously, for him at the Masters, missing the cut, and then, not quite having like the gear that he felt like he needed at Oak Hill to get it done at the PGA. And then watching, a player at Brooks who now has every claim to say that, maybe Brooks is the generational player of this era, and like, that's just great, son. I mean, you can tell that, like, Rory says
totally.
Like, he pays attention.
Totally. And I think the chef's kiss episode, it's like when you make a perfect thing in the oven, it comes out and you're like, that was money. For me, it was the episode with Wyndham Clark and Joel Dahmen. And the reason why I say this, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit before, but I think they're both 2 players that are in the same frame of mind in one form of another, that one leans in to getting help and one is leaning out. And you could see one player ascend and one player descend. And I think that storyline between those 2 players it's really perfect.
Well, thank you. I mean, that episode, that was one of the earliest episodes that we finished, because it just, the storyline, you can't write it. Like, and that was one that we didn't really go into the season thinking like Wyndham Clark and Joel Dahmen would like share an episode together. But, we spent so much time with Joel. And interestingly, like, the parallels between their lives are so fascinating.
Insane.
And, and as we got to know Wyndham early in the year, we're like, wow, like, this guy, it's a lot like Joel. They're both not really from golf like towns. There's like a West or Pacific Northwest. I think Wyndham lives in like Colorado, and Joel obviously is from the Washington State, and they both like lost their mom at a really young age, or at a really pivotal age, I guess. And it's interesting to see like what he took away from that was, and he says it in the show, it's kind of like, I can't take life too serious, because, it can kind of end at any moment. And, and then Wyndham in his own way had like the opposite takeaway from that, which is like, I'm going to kind of sacrifice everything. I'm going to sacrifice having a normal life to live up to my mom's memory. Yeah. And because of her, really, like, she wanted me to win big, and I'm going to live up to that. That was sort of my promise to myself in honor of her memory. And, and Wyndham sort of made a ton of sacrifices and sought out help and got mental health coaching, and pays off for him in like the biggest possible way. He's a major champion now. And then you see Joel, really struggle with that, and not just Joel, but the family around him, Gino and Joel's wife and Gino's wife, and just how much they are trying to like reach out to him to get him help. And it's a fascinating story that we never expected to come together so kind of perfectly. And it's again, the kind of thing you can't write. So I couldn't be more like proud of that episode. I mean, the team did an amazing
really
job
good. Really good. And the runner up for me was, I think Rickie's episode was fantastic as well. And, I think the reason why I like these 2 episodes so much is the endings of the episodes are so good. The ending, and I think it's the music choice, that it's just like that little strum of music that just like pulls at your heart, and it just rips me apart when you cue the music up. The episode's almost over, and then you see everybody getting like teary and cry, and I'm like, man, how am I supposed to keep it together right now? This music's so good, like this story just that's being told. You're killing me with the music, man. You gotta let it just play out in silence, because I'm just over here crying away.
We like, that's the beauty of having sort of 20 weeks of editing, is you can just grab your heartstrings, man. We can we get the sight, sound, and motion. That's the beauty of cinema, and it is. it allows you to relive a moment where if you're a hardcore fan, like, you know what happens, but in the moment in the show, like, you kind of, that all falls away. And we try to bring you into it in a new way, at least, and have you see it in a different way. And yeah, we throw some dramatic music under there, a little inspiration. We might get you a little bit. But like Rickie's a great example. I know you brought up his episode. This is like, it's a real story. So Rickie was the first player to say yes to Full Swing. Like, Rickie said yes in 2019 and was very, very committed to this very early on. And, and like gave us a ton of access in season 1, like, and didn't have a payoff. And, all these players, like, it's never easy, but we had to go to like his team and say, like, I'm so sorry. I know you were the first player to say yes. I know you give us a ton of time all year. Like, you're not going to be in the show for season 1. And, like, to tell a superstar like Rickie Fowler that he's not making it in the show, I mean, obviously he took it fine, but it's a hard conversation to have. And what we said was, like, we see it, like, you're coming back. Like, we see the game, turning. Like, if you have patience with us and you kind of give us the chance to kind of finish your story, like, we had like 80% of it done, but we're like, we don't have an ending. So let us, like, just stick with us. And when you do have that payoff, it's going to be like 2 years of emotion kind of building up and then being released all at once. And that's what happened. So, credit to Rickie, like, he trusted us, wasn't really in season 1 in really any meaningful way, and gets, like, the most compelling sort of powerful arc that pays off over kind of a whole 2-year period. And when that putt goes in Detroit, like, as a viewer, you feel the same emotion that he feels. It's not even like celebration. It's just like relief. Like, fine, finally.
I think it's because first off, I know Rickie well, and I think I just related so much to what he was going through during those couple years. And I think seeing just the access that you guys had and see him, like, kind of start to open up and become out of the shell that he was in, because I relate to that so much during when I was playing poorly on tour and just not being able to open up. And I just, when I saw Rickie during that time period, I just saw so much of myself. And I think that's why that episode, when he finally made the putt to win and just the success he had at the US Open, I'm like, my wife's crying behind me. I'm tearing up. And then, we also have a daughter. Maya's a little older than Anna Carter, but still, just all of it was so relatable to me. And that episode as well was just an absolute winner.
Well, thank you. And honestly, like, Allison, Rickie's wife, like, just, she gave us so much just access and truth and authenticity. And, like, you can't make a story like that pay off without somebody like Allison, like, because Rickie, obviously he can try to bring you into his head as much as he can, but, having someone else who cares so much about the player, but has really no control over, like, the outcomes, you feel it even more because you feel like what they went through together, and they're both incredible athletes in their own right. And, and it's just having it pay off for both of them. Like, you feel the emotional reaction so much more just because you've now gotten to know her as well. And you've kind of been on the journey with them as a couple and as a family, and just to have that kind of all pay off for them together, it just means so much. And, and that's like the magic of a show like this, where you have the time and the space and the context to be able to really get to know somebody and to spend time in their world. And when it pays off big.
Absolutely. And, we just talked about Rickie, but also Justin has his own kind of featured episode, and Jordan's, kind of in the episodes, pretty much all of them, like, throughout, but not quite as much of a feature. And so I got to ask you this: when's the spring break, 2K, whatever Netflix episode? Is that going to be in season 3 or is that in season 4? Do we have a chance to show that we can do this thing on Netflix, or what, Chad?
When are you guys going? I mean, I'll get the cameras there. Like,
you're like, dude, anytime, like, just let us bring the cameras.
Every single time last season when we were filming, and I see on social media that, like, all you guys are at some cool place having fun, I sent a lot of angry text messages to agents being like, why are we not there? So yes, anytime, Smylie, you make that happen and we'll have the cameras there in 2 seconds.
You know, I ain't making that call. That ain't my call to make. I'm just the guy. I'm the guy at the end of the bench. You know, it's the other three. They got the sign off. My signature's always right there, ready to go.
Don't sell yourself short, brother. I think you got a lot more power than you think. So you just got to tell them, look, they're here for me. You know, they're not even here for you. They're here for me. Like, we're making the Smylie show on Netflix now. So you guys, they're here for me.
Bang,
don't
bang.
worry about the camera. That's what we got.
Bang, bang. Oh gosh, man, that would be a fun one. I know we were golf influencers in 2016 before golf influencers were really a thing, and you and I have had this conversation before this, that golf, since 2016 when, we kind of we're like, oh wait, golf, there's some young guys and we've kind of made golf cool. But I say that we made golf cool. We just filmed everything we did and we just posted and people liked it. But golf now in 2024, it's cool. Everybody's doing it. And It wasn't always been that case. And that's probably why this full season's been so successful, is that you have a huge crop of people that are just drawn to this game.
Yeah, I think golf was already trending in 2016, and obviously the young crop of players on the PGA Tour that were more socially they post, so you guys being the perfect example of that, but also guys like Max who really are open on social media. This generation of young player, they grew up with social media, so it wasn't kind of the era of Phil and Tiger and there's not a lot of stuff coming from them directly. I think you see the impact of that and the growth of the game as really accelerating in COVID, because it was one of the only things that people could do outside, and everyone's working from home and they're doing conference calls from the golf course, guilty as charged, by the way, I was there too. And I think that that gave, that really kind of, I think, created this wave. And, the thing that's real and what I love about golf in general is golf is super healthy. Golf probably never been healthier, and it's gotten younger and it's gotten cooler and more women are playing and it's more diverse. And there's just way more touch points and access points for the game than there really has ever been in its entire history. And I kind of think it's maybe golf had a cultural moment like this in the 60s. That was, in the Rat Pack era and Jack and Arnie, that early kind of cool golf was influenced. That might've been the moment, but certainly it's not been anything like that since then. And also that it's not centered around one player like Tiger. It's golf is broader than that. And even though pro golf, as you well know, is still in kind of a moment of flux and a moment of chaos, and a lot of the back and forth around the pro game, I think is, has a real risk of turning fans off. Golf as a whole has never been healthier. And I think what we hope to do with Full Swing Season 2, and if you've watched the show yet, listening to this podcast, or you're about to watch it, it is about, it's for fans, and it's whether it's if you're fans of Full Swing and you're not necessarily a golf fan and this brings you into the world, or you're a hardcore golf fan, there's something in this show for you. And I think it's a chance to just make something that's awesome in golf. And you may not think it's awesome, feel free to be haters. I'm fine with that. But to get to see inside a world like this, to live alongside these athletes and kind of the highs and lows, it's just a nice thing that doesn't involve having to have a fight about who's getting paid what. And I think golf is doing great. And I think if this show can help point the way to that these characters are awesome individuals and they're doing incredible stuff, I think it's awesome.
And in this season 2, how much more footage did y'all capture compared to season 1 that y'all just had to totally dump?
It was 750 hours in season 1. It was 900 hours in season 2. So it was another 150. Is that how the math works? Yeah, another 150 hours of footage that we shot on our movie cameras. We bring in another 10,000 hours of archive, and we have a system that sits on a camera truck that allows us to capture every single camera at every tournament, basically, including all the mics on the tees, and we can capture in real time because those are all getting fed in, even if they're not getting used on the broadcast.
That's how you get those hot mics.
That's right. We've got an operator sitting in New York who's literally just okay, Rickie Fowler's teeing off, and the second he steps on that first tee, we start recording those mics and all the cameras on that hole. And then as he moves along the court, we're lighting up that stuff as he's playing his whole 18 holes, and we do that for every time he tees it up. And so that's 10,000 hours of stuff right there. But that like allows us to show the golf in a way that like doesn't look like what you see on TV. We can sort of relive those moments from other angles and with the real hot mics, and we don't have to put mics on players while they're trying to swing and win a major or something like that. But yeah, you end up pulling all that stuff in, and a lot of it gets left on the cutting room floor. But by the same token, it's like we want to make 8 really great episodes, and like I said with Rickie in season 1, like you need a payoff. Like you have to have an arc. You can't like the kiss of death for an episode is just like stasis. It's really hard to tell a story that is flat, like where they're just playing okay all year. And it's not anything great. It's not really terrible. It's just like flat. And that's a really hard story to tell. You need extreme highs and extreme lows, or only extreme lows, or only extreme highs. You need like variability to be able to land a story. And, I think about like the Tom Kim episode is like a really interesting kind of example of a story that really could have been that flat story. Like Tom's a really great personality. We started filming with him early in the season. There's so many hilarious moments, like him showing up at Augusta for the first time and parking in the wrong spot and like not being able to find out where the he's trying to get the sandwich and like ended up in the champion's locker room on accident. Like, it was all like just what you expect for being 20 years old, like showing up at the Masters for the first time and being overwhelmed by all of it. And Tom's was a great character, but as the season progressed, it's like, okay, he's playing well, but like you can't make a show about him like being in the mud at the PGA Championship. You needed some moment where he actually had to prove it and like rise up against some adversity. And going into the Open Championship, we weren't sure if the Tom episode was going to make it. And we're like, we got great moments. There's a lot of really funny moments, but this show isn't about moments. It's about stories, and it's about scenes, and it's how these things build up. And sure enough, like, after the first round, he injures his ankle, rolls his ankle.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of players in that scenario, I mean, he had like serious tear in his ankle, and you watch him swing. I mean, he was swinging on one leg basically. And the weather was crap. And like, most players in that case would give up, or they would withdraw. And like Tom like gutted it out and ended up getting, coming in second. And like people, we're watching this all unfold. We're like, oh my God, like there's our ending, because, he everything, he's obviously a prodigy, and he's multi-time winner on the PGA Tour. He turned 21 like while we were filming the show last year. People forget how young he is. You look at a guy like Ludwig over, I think Ludwig's like 24, and even like Nick Dunlap is I think 23. So, Tom's 20 and he'd already won twice on tour. And so for us to get a moment where he really, it was a challenge. He had to rise up, and he had to, his prodigyness and his superstar, like didn't matter. It was like, you got to like grit it out. And that was the payoff of that episode. And then of course he goes on and wins in Vegas again, just because he's Tom Kim and he gets it done. But yeah, that's a great example of a show, of what you need to make an episode actually land.
I'm taking mental notes right now for if I ever make a comeback in the game, Chad. It's like, all right, I can't just come back. I actually have to play well and like really and captivate an audience. Like I can't just go and make the cut. I need to finish top 5. And so I'm thinking in my head, it's like, you know what?
Like, yeah. You gotta
maybe I'm not a feature guy. I don't know.
I think you gotta come out Smylie. You gotta miss a bunch of cuts, but then you gotta qualify yourself for the US Open, and you gotta win the damn thing. Like that'd be,
and I gotta win. Okay. I gotta win the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. All right, let's finish on a little Ryder Cup stuff, and that'll be kind of how we close out this interview, because I think all this stuff's been fantastic, and thank you for your time through this. And as we kind of just finished with this Ryder Cup, were you surprised at the level of access that you got for that, just from being in players' homes when they got the calls, and just how intense these moments were?
Yeah, I mean that was a shit ton of work, like to get that access over a period of like a year and a half. And as we started filming season 1, and it was going well, we started conversations with the PGA of America and with Ryder Cup Europe about the Ryder Cup. And they at first like really wanted it to be its own thing, and I think like they rightly so. The Ryder Cup's like is so special, and it took a lot of consensus building and trust building to like not only have them willing to like let us film it at all, but actually have it be part of Full Swing and not its own show or its own thing. And one of the
Okay.
promises that we made this was really more of a concern from Ryder Cup Europe, but like so many of the cast from season 1 were Americans. And so their big concern was like, they're coming off this dominant performance in Whistling Straits. Like a lot of your cast are Americans. Like, how does this not end up becoming like the USA story? And we wanted them. And so the promise to the Ryder Cup, both sides, was like, we're gonna do it equally. Like we're gonna every time we go and film with somebody, a US captain with Zach, we're gonna do a shoot with Luke. And as long as you lean in, like, and you give us the access, we'll do everything we can to make it as like fair and equal a portrayal as possible in terms of like the amount of screen time and how we kind of tell the story. And, and Luke was amazing. Like Luke, by the way, Luke Donald was my favorite player growing up. Like, obviously I'm a Tiger guy, but like I was 14 years old when Tiger went nuts in 2000 and like, and I could not relate to that golf. Like I was a diehard junior golfer, played pretty competitively, not as well as you did at that age, but like, was into it. Tiger golf is like not relatable. Luke Donald golf, I was like, that's my guy. So I love this swing. I'm still a visor guy, actually, just because of Luke Donald. I still wear visors when I play golf. So he was my favorite player. I had Mizuno irons. Like I'm obsessed with Luke.
Oh, you're definitely a Luke guy then. The Mizuno irons in the visor. That's like chef's kiss. Could you putt and chip too?
It was. My short game was way better than my long game. I wasn't, obviously not a great iron player, but actually, if you watch my golf swing, it actually like I have the same finish. I try to copy Luke Donald and everything.
Love it.
So the one moment I've ever had in this show, to be honest, like where I was a little bit starstruck, was like going to Luke Donald's house to like not talk him into, but meet him and talk about like, hey, you become the captain. You weren't even really the first choice. It was Henrik. Like, we want to see it from your perspective, and you're going to be underdogs. And so going into his house and sitting down and having him walk out, I was like, oh my God, it's Luke Donald. And I asked for his autograph. It's the only autograph I've ever asked for. And he thought I was joking. And then he went and got me a hat and signed it. So I have it in my office somewhere. It's like, I don't know where it is. It's around here somewhere. But anyway, so, loved Luke and then loved Zach too. Like they both really understood what it was going to be, and they gave us a ton of access all year, like all year long. Anytime we asked, the captain said yes, and the show wouldn't have worked if it wasn't for that. And getting our cameras, like I said earlier in this podcast, like the Ryder Cup is the one time in this show where we've ever been able to plan, like because we knew. Like again, we knew one team was going to win and one team was going to lose, which means like that's great. You get heartbreak and celebration for everybody, and like there's no person who's just kind of like, I did all right. I finished tied 11th. It's just like you win or you lose. So we knew that was going to be great, and the payoff in Rome was going to be electric. Having been to a Ryder Cup before, I was like, it's going to be insane. Like seeing that with our cameras inside the ropes, just the booing and the cheer and the songs, and we were like, it's going to be great. So we knew once we got to Rome, it was going to be great. But we had to tell the story of like getting to Rome, and the captain's picks were a thing that we knew. Like we knew what the captain's picks were before anyone else in the world. Like we were sitting in the room with Zach and his assistant captains when they made the choice, and I get a text on that morning. Here's the picks. Like the 6 picks are these guys, and we had to get cameras out to like those locations. Zach was going to make all the phone calls. It took like 25 minutes total, and we had 3 different crews in 3 different time zones, like bouncing around different houses. I mean, we had a crew like camped out outside of JT's place in Nashville. He had said he wasn't going to let us film it. We were like, get there anyway. So we flew a crew literally like that night, got her there like first thing in the morning, like trying to find his house and just like waiting in his cul-de-sac, like hoping that we can like see him through the window. And I was going to apologize later, and he went out and like walked with Jill because he was too nervous. I mean, he legitimately did not think he had a chance. And then we had another crew in Jupiter that had to get from Keegan's house to Rickie's house, and they lived like a couple miles away. And that call was like, there was 10 minutes in between. So, ton of credit to both of those guys. They said, we'll let you film it, like yes or no. Like if I'm the pick, great. If not, great. We want the cameras there. And the thing that was most crushing with Keegan was, we knew that it was a no. We had cameras coming. He knew that we were supposed to be there, but we hadn't like told him that we were there yet. And we do these call sheets, for our producers, and there was a typo in the call sheets. They had the wrong address for Keegan's house. So the producer was like not there, and the call was going out in like 10 minutes. And I had to call Keegan and say, hey, buddy, like, I think we got the wrong address. Can you confirm this is your address? And we're coming in with the cameras. And because I called him, he thought that meant it was a yes, because he like thought that crews were coming and hey, they're only going to be there for the yes. So he opens the door, big smile on his face, like, let's see what this is all about. And then like literally a minute after our producer got there, he gets the phone call, and, we just play it out in real time. And the worst part about that was, it is a crushing moment, and the first thing, I did the first interview with Keegan in January last season. And the first thing he said out of his mouth is, the only thing that matters is me making this Ryder Cup team. Like, he had won in Japan kind of in the fall. Yeah, he was trending up. Like, all I want is to make the Ryder Cup team. And so just like all of that building to that moment, and to have his heart broken that way was brutal, and have the cameras there to capture it. I give him so much credit for letting us kind of live there. The worst part was, as soon as that shot cuts, like, that producer had to leave and get to Rickie's house in like 10 minutes. And so we couldn't even stick around and like give him a hug. It was just kind of like, thanks, man, bye, like out the door on the road, like trying to get to Rickie's house. And we're on the phone with the producer. We're like, are you there? He's like, I'm 2 minutes out. It's like, Zach's going to make the call. Like, get there, and Allison opens the door. Like, he runs through the house, goes to where Rickie was sitting on the back, gets the camera set right as the phone call comes in. And, those were like real moments. That was like real time, their real reaction, and as you see in the show, like JT, like, ran away from us because he was afraid that it was going to be a no. And we're like crushed because we had a camera there. We're like, oh, like, it was a yes. And we didn't get any footage of it. And then like 3 hours later, like, JT texted me and he sent me that video that Jill had taken. And he was like, I hope this works. And I asked, he'd asked her to film it. And it works. It actually works better because it just shows how like he did not think it was going to go his way, and he was terrified. Yeah. And
you would have never known that. I didn't know that wasn't y'all's camera. Filming Justin. That's actually kind of cooler too. Yeah.
Yeah. They're out on a walk. He gets the phone call. That's her filming on her iPhone, and every single second of that clip we used. And then like 8 hours later, he sends me a text, and he has a huge bass, and he went fishing. So not too bad.
Man, this just gets me excited for the Ryder Cup in New York. It's going to be absolutely insane. And watching Keegan Bradley kind of get the rejection, and then watch and cheer his team on when at home with his family. I think, like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this guy, if he doesn't make the team in New York, like, how could you not want this guy as like whether it be a vice captain or a captain? I just thought, I haven't really thought about Keegan as a captain, but in that moment watching, I'm thinking, this guy like lives and breathes the Ryder Cup, loves all of these guys. He loves the USA and has relationships with all these players, and they're looking for a captain. I think Keegan should be a guy they consider.
I mean, you will not find a bigger Keegan Bradley fan than me after this show, and just the experience we had with him, and just how mature a professional he was in the moment of real heartbreak. And that, in that scene, like, we went back to his house on Saturday and filmed him watching the Ryder, or Sunday or whatever it was, and filmed him watching, and he's wearing his Ryder Cup hat, he's sitting there with his kids, like, cheering on JT. It's like, none of that stuff's like, we didn't ask him to do it. He's just like, he loves it so much and he cares. And you just can't not root for him, like, how do you not fall in love with Keegan, who, and Keegan and I are the same age, which is like interesting to me personally. We have kids that are basically the same age, I feel like I'm lucky enough that I'm at kind of like the prime of my career. But as a pro golfer, as an athlete, like, you start to hit your late 30s, like you're starting to look at like what's next. And, just the fact that for him, the pressure was just not just to make the team, but to know that maybe this is his last real shot. And it's like, you can't script that kind of real emotion. And, and props to him for like being willing, win or lose, good or bad, to like let us film it. And, just you feel it. Like, you can't fake a moment like that. And I think that moment of his sort of rejection call is like one of the most visceral, like, sports moments that I've ever got to see, like, up close and personal and be a part of. And it's just so cool that he let us do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope he's playing, whether it be the President's Cup in Montreal or the Ryder Cup in New York. But yeah, big Keegan fan, always been a fan. He's been a mentor of me as well. So And I think it's a great close, man. I think we kind of covered it all. I'm sure there's plenty more that we could have talked about, but at this point, the episode's going to be out when people are listening and watching this episode. So I'm sure they're pretty excited to go watch as well. And I got to head out as well because I got 30 minutes left of this entire season. I binged it all last night, watched it all this morning, and I have 30 minutes left and I'm dying to watch. So, Chad, I think that's just like a farewell. It's like, I got to go and watch this thing.
All right, brother. Well, you enjoy it, and thanks again for having me on. It was always great to join you.
Yeah, let's get together on the link sometimes as well. I know you're a Southern boy, so you'll have to come over here to my home track here at Shoal Creek in Vestavia. We'll have you out.
Let's go, baby.
I've actually watched a couple of episodes of y'all earlier, and you guys have some good takes. So thanks for what you guys do.
It's cool to see what you guys are doing. And I know golf fans appreciate it, but we do too. So please keep it up.
I think you're doing a tremendous job. And I listen to this podcast. It's really cool. And